In the early 2000s, Konami secured the ESPN license and published a whole host of ESPN licensed games, such as MLS Game Night, International Track and Field, International Winter Sports, NHL National Hockey Night, X Games Skateboarding, NBA Tonight, and NFL Primetime. Despite having all the licenses they could want, most of these games were disappointments, the saddest of them all being NFL Primetime. Not because it was any worse than the others, it just carried with it the legendary Primetime legacy with Chris Berman and Tom Jackson, who are both in this nearly unplayable game. To the untrained eye, looking back at these games may quickly lead to boredom and shame. However, submitted for your approval is one ESPN NBA Tonight 2002, the best NBA basketball video game no one remembers. Like a lot of other mid-budget sports titles at the time, this game was sandwiched in between the fierce competition between the major competitors like EA and 2K. It had one previous release on the Dreamcast, which was not very good, and although undergoing a name change and losing the ESPN license, had two sequels under the name NBA Starting 5, the last of which was only released in Japan. At first glance, NBA Tonight 2002 seems like the rest of these early Konami sports games, a cool use of the ESPN likeness, but nothing compared to the gameplay of EA and 2K. It must be said, this game is one of the best uses of the ESPN likeness in any ESPN licensed game. The menus nail those mid-90s to early 2000s ESPN TV graphics. I would go as far as to say that this game felt more ESPN-like than even NFL 2K5 in some areas, and that's saying a lot. However, where this game really shines is in the franchise mode. If you play this game for exhibition mode, and you're used to NBA Live or NBA 2K, even back in 2002, this game will certainly leave you wanting. In franchise mode, however, you get the full richness of the game. First off, the visuals, if played on an emulator in at least 720p, will unlock a clarity not available in 2002. The player models are actually quite good. The animations are smooth enough, and those 90s ESPN TV graphics are a constant dose of nostalgia. And the nostalgia is good. Real good. The music that plays in the background is quite limited. It does seem to be music specifically made for the game, which is nice, and it has that old school rap sound. While I'm not a huge fan of rap, I do like the sound of rap from the 80s, 90s, and very early 2000s. One of the most unique features, player abilities, is something that seems to come and go in sports games. All Pro Football 2K8 had special player abilities. Even some of the later Madden games toyed with special abilities on and off. What this feature does for making players feel different is enormous. It makes you consider more than just their overall rating or their individual skill ratings. A player might have a higher overall than another player, but they might also have a low recovery attribute, or the lower rated player might have the clutch ability. All this makes more players matter in more ways, other than just putting the highest number at the top of your roster, which gets repetitive and boring. At least with special abilities, there are more ways to build and evaluate your roster. The actual on-court gameplay isn't that bad. I personally believe that camera angles can make or break a sports game, and this game has them all. Up close, it doesn't look that great, but from a 3/4 view up high, it looks fine. Is it up to par with EA and 2K? Not quite, but it's about as good, if not better, than NBA Shootout 2003 and possibly even 2004, so it's not bad. If the gameplay is the only turnoff, then you can play a jerry-rig coach mode by not picking a team to control, then switching to your team to make any needed substitutions. This removes the need for the gameplay to have a perfect feel, and lets you just manage the roster, draft, sign players, and watch how they perform. The franchise mode does what it can to have a sort of weekly recap show, though nothing on the level of 2K5. When a week is complete, you can select the double clutch option and see a summary of the week's best performers. While it's not a whole animated show, it does give a little of that flavor if you couple it with the league news, which shows things like new trades, free agents, and injuries. Managing the roster is simple, which lets you spend more time looking at player ratings and less time navigating menus. The salary cap has been completely replaced with a point system that has the same effect. Each team has 1,000 points, and better players with longer contracts will cost more points. The game offers a very challenging hard mode for those that want to ram their head against the wall after a layup bounces off the rim for the 10th time. The pre-game presentation has player introductions and lighting effects, which aren't much, but it's nice to see your players run out onto the court. NBA 2Night 2002 offers a fair amount of customization in the franchise mode. It lets you play as few games as 14, which I prefer, all the way up to 82 games if you're hardcore. Rules and playoff eliminations are all subject to your preferences, which allows the game to be tailored more to your taste. Some of the gameplay issues were refined in the later NBA Starting 5 games, so while they are better games on the court, they certainly don't have the charm, the ESPN nostalgia, or even some of the customization features like a 14-game season. It's unfortunate that NFL Primetime 2002 didn't have on-field gameplay or franchise features that were as good as NBA 2Night. Else it could have been one of my favorite football games. Overall, as someone who doesn't really care for basketball, ESPN NBA 2Night 2002 had all the right things, in all the right places, in just the right amount, to be a very entertaining and nostalgic sports experience.
Not much time to go. With the spin, with the 22-footer.